Welcome to Soaring in Faith. Today I will be reviewing from last week's topic. I wrapped up about generational cycles and the different severities. Last week I shared about fear and procrastination as cycles. And then the week prior, I shared about cycles that addressed abuse and domestic violence. And so last week I was open in sharing that I had ended up entering a very unhealthy cycle that I ended up realizing that I had repeated because I had also seen my mom in a very unhealthy relationship. And it wasn't until after I got out that I kind of realized the similarities between the relationships. And it opened up my eyes, and I was like, God, I've got to make changes, because if I don't make changes, this is going to continue to repeat itself. And I just desired to make a positive difference in my life and for the future generations to come. So one thing I wanted to stress that I didn't really connect the dots to last week was I had mentioned entering a very unhealthy relationship and making the attempt to help someone who didn't want the help. And one thing I wanted to stress is that that person, make sure that it was known that that person, the reason why they didn't want to make the changes, they said they expressed feeling fearful. And they were fearful because they felt the words that what was relayed to me was, I'm not, and this is from the person, I've never succeeded. I'm not used to succeeding. I'm used to failing. And, to change my life to become more successful, I feel like I have haters that are going to try to take me out. And what he meant was he would lose his life if he made any attempts to live a better lifestyle. So for that reason, he chose to stay back. And I must say, he ended up losing his life. But it wasn't the way that he predicted. He lost his life because he made some bad decisions. And I think he just chose to stay back. But it was a comfort zone for him. It was what he was comfortable with. And so when we discussed that, I accepted the fact that he wasn't ready for change. And you can't force anyone who doesn't want change. He was living a life that was most comfortable for him. And anytime you have to step outside of your comfort zone, it can be very, very, very uncomfortable. And that's why today I'll be sharing scriptures, because like that person, when I was very, very young, I was also caught up in a lot of darkness, and it's hard to see something that you've never lived. It really is, because your mind, your world is caught up in this certain type of lifestyle, and you don't know anything else other than what you see, ways of how others are living. But the first step is accepting that you deserve that too, and fighting to make those positive changes. And I think he just struggled with, he just felt comfortable. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I wanted to bring that up because how many of us, I know I have, how many of us have ever felt fearful about making any kind of change that would be for our betterment? How many of us still struggle with that today? So just a little something to think about, just a quick review on that piece. And then another piece I wanted to share is I had mentioned about my mother calling me names. They weren't the name that she gave me at birth. nothing to do with that. She just called me names. And so it was when I was in my late 20s, or no, I'm saying, let's see, late teens to early 20s. It was when I became a parent. I remember us discussing it. I said, Mama, why would you call me all those names? And she said, yeah, I thought it would help you, like, be better in life, like fight against that and, prove me wrong. And I asked her, like, where she got it from. And I remember her telling me that her dad used to call her names, and that's my granddaddy. And I loved my granddaddy. It's hard for me to see that because he was such a different person when I was growing up, but I guess he was more old school. And unfortunately, from it coming from her only living parent and a father, a man, it really warped her. She was a strong woman, but she struggled in a lot of areas. And, the ones she wasn't able to overcome, like she did overcome alcoholism, which was a blessing. She turned her life to Christ, which was a blessing. But I do recall there were times that she enrolled in college about 2 or 3 times, and for whatever reason, she just struggled to finish college. And I do believe that the names that she was called or referred to outside of her name that she was given at birth really affected her. And so one thing I want to stress is, let me point out, there's another generational cycle, but this time stemming from my granddaddy. And, that was hard because he was an awesome man. But, that's where that came from. So it didn't work for her, but apparently she thought it would work for me. And what it did was drove me down a dark, dark, dark era in my life as a teenager until I made the decision to come up and out of it. But it was with the fight, a lot of emotional, mental fight. Whew, it was a fight. So I wanted to share those two, just elaborate a little bit on cycles. Another thing that I did was I made a little list of cycles and wanted to share these cycles with you. And if there are cycles that I don't include, that any of my viewers or listeners think about, anything that comes to mind, please drop it in my comments, because I think it's good for other listeners and viewers to see those and identify with those. So I have a little list going on here that I wrote, and some of these are repetitive based on what I've discussed over the past couple of weeks, what I've shared over the past couple of weeks. But I have negativity, procrastination, violence, anger, fear, hoarding, clutter, anxiety, doubt, lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, unhealthy relationships, abuse, and lack of self-respect. So like I said, if there's something I didn't mention, drop it in the comments area for others to see, because it's just to help people recognize cycles. So last week I mentioned to you, I have this little case of cards and they're scriptures. And I have 2 scriptures that I want to share with you. One, I will share a story, so I'll share that one last. But the first one I want to share is based on my life, dating all the way back to when I was a little kid, but mostly during my teen years. And the scripture is Psalm 40, verse 2. He drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. And maybe that's Mary, I don't know. That's a different kind of word. But he drew my feet up from the pit of destruction, out of a miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. That's how I internalize my life today, because when I look back at my life, there was so much darkness. I mean, life really felt like hell for me. I didn't have a lot to feel happy about. I knew that the future that I desired to have in life felt bright and happy, But the way that things were for me back then, it was dark and gloomy. And it takes a lot for a child to envision some kind of light when you're living in such darkness. But I just want to stress to so many, be that light for others who are struggling in darkness, because it's hard to see light sometimes. And I did for a long time see my life as a very dark pit, and definitely destructive. Very, very destructive, based on the people in my environment. Like the boyfriend my mom allowed in our home, and the community, the people in the community, not all of them, but there was a lot of darkness. So I thank God for where I am today. The other card that I want to share, the little cards look like this, they're super cute. The other one is Psalm 34:4. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. I was delivered. There are still times that I experience a little fear because I'm constantly growing, but I'm going to leave you with a beautiful story. A few years ago, my family and I attended a small church, and in that church there was an elder, and I had given a speech at this church, and the elder approached me and asked me if I would ever be interested in giving a speech during his prison ministry, or to the participants of his prison ministry, I'll say that. And I accepted. So we set up a date, and at one point there was some question as to whether or not I would be addressing women or men. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I hope I get to address women, because I'm not real comfortable addressing the men. And it was mainly based on my history of being violated. And when I say that, I'm referring to the physical abuse I endured as a child by my mom's boyfriend, a lot of things that I had encountered. And I just wasn't sure if I was ready for that yet. Also, just knowing that so many of the young men in my neighborhood that I tried to save, so many of them had gone through, ended up in prison, and I, it just kind of caused me to reflect real deep about my own past. And I was like, man, I couldn't save them when I was little, and it probably was some of the choices I made, as a younger person, I had no luck saving anyone, so I didn't know how impactful I would be speaking to men in prison. Well, the day came for me to speak, and I thought I was speaking to women. And I'm standing in the room preparing to give my speech, and I see about 3 to 5 men walk in, and I'm like, oh, they must be coming in to set up the tables. And I'm looking around, just mentally preparing and saying a quiet prayer to myself. And before I realized it, the whole room was filled with men. 75 to 100 maybe. And I froze. I felt fear. A part of me even, of course I had doubt. And then there was a part of me that stirred up a little anger got stirred up, because when I looked out there at the men that I was preparing to address, I saw, I kind of envisioned the man that my mom dated. And I was like, gosh, it feels like a bunch of people with his faces. And it was God that got me through that morning. It was completely uncomfortable, but I was there and there was no turning back. So I gave my speech. And one person I remember seeing sitting out, he was attending it. Sorry, I have shades on and my eyes are still watering. But there was a man who had shades on, and I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe he was missing an eye or something, I don't know, but he had shades on. And at the time that was a problem for me, because for me, I truly and honestly believe that the eyes are a window to the soul. And I love to see eyes, but I couldn't see this man's eyes. But I continued on with my speech, and I just saw this glare with these real dark shades on. And, I carried on. And afterward, that person came up to me, along with a few others that talked to me. But the one person that I was focused on, they had the dark shades on, actually walked up to me and said, "Ma'am, I really appreciate you sharing your story, because it's good to hear a woman's point of view from so much of what we've experienced in our past." And man, did that hit me. I was so focused on the shades that the man had on, but I ended up reaching that person. And a few others came up to me as well, and told me that it helped them. But a huge part to my speech that I shared with them is that there was purpose in their life, purpose for their life, and that it was important to figure out what their purpose was and make a difference. Just because you're behind bars or in prison, incarcerated, doesn't mean that it has to be the end. There are so many lives on this earth to touch, to make a difference, to be different for their families, their children, spouses, relatives, loved ones. Be an inspiration. And so after I gave my speech, and I told you that the gentleman said what he said, which really touched my heart. It was nice. There was one of the lead prisoners who kind of organized these. He worked along. I'm assuming that he worked along with the elder that organized the prison ministry. He got up to speak, and it wasn't until then that I learned that most of the people I had spoken with had committed pretty serious offenses, and I think 85 to 90% of them were serving life in prison. And that, oh gosh, I was sitting up there speaking to them and telling them, when you get out, in my mind, I was thinking they might be out 5-10 years from now, but many of them were serving life. And many of them, to be realistic, may not ever see the light of day. If, before, I don't know. I don't know. But it's not for me to know. But one thing that I do know is that even in a letter, some way, somehow, they can make a difference in someone else's life, whether they're released from prison or they remain in serving their life sentences. But the main point I want to bring up is I walked out of that prison with the whole entirely different mindset. It affected my mind for about a good week because I didn't expect that. And it wasn't until I got ready to open up my mouth to give my speech that I realized that I still had unfinished business and that I was still dealing with a lot of anger based on the way I was treated. And also struggling with the fact that I made such an effort to help so many who were still kind of stuck and not believing in myself that the speech that I had to give was going to be impactful for the prisoners. But it healed me. And it wasn't until then that I realized that I still had, like I said, some unfinished work. But it helped me grow. And that's why this card, I'll read it again. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. That was pretty fearful. It was fear that I was dealing with when I realized that I was going to be addressing a large room of men. But I got past it, and it definitely helped my growth. So, I just stress to you all, continue to find different ways to grow. Face your fears. I've been finding over the past, let's say 5 years, that situations have been coming to me like just, they occur in my life and I'm almost forced to face them. And I've been dealing with them pretty darn well. So I'll leave you with that, and we will continue on. I'll be back next week. And until then, you take care. God bless you all. Much love to you all. And go out there and work on breaking some generational cycles. Identify them and break them. Work on breaking them. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. And I feel like I'm forgetting one. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Y'all take care, and I'll see you next week, okay? All right.